Good morning, everybody. I was all set up, ready to hit the button, and I realized how bright it was behind me. So I'm just getting myself reorganized in a new position. This morning, early this morning, I began my day by reading a reflection from the senior warden at Epiphany, whose name is Gary Hales. Let me shut this door. And Gary's reflection was talking about trying to give ourselves some healthy distance on the politics of the world right now. And he said that basically in his lifetime he's seen 1 million presidents, and that the impact of presidential leadership actually isn't all that great in our lives. That the only time he really felt that he was directly, his life was being hugely affected by presidential policy was when he was in Vietnam, and the policy basically from the top, from Lyndon Johnson, the president in the mid-60s, issued an order that went into the military Pentagon and all the way down to the grunts there in Vietnam in the Army and the Marines, that you could not fire until you'd been fired upon. And you can see how that would have a real effect on how a soldier feels being out in the middle of a tropical jungle getting eaten by mosquitoes in a place that's very different from any place in the United States. And a little sense of powerlessness and maybe even some resentment there. And in fact, resenting the 3 presidents of the Vietnam era, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and Richard Nixon in that order, was something that lots of Americans, strangely, because I was a very little boy, but I'd hear the parents talking, something conservatives and liberals all had negative things to say about the presidents during that year. It was a real lost time in the United States, and of course we're in a very lost time now. But there's always a ray of hope. Gary's story of not firing until you've been fired upon reminds me of another story that's even in some ways sadder than being afraid in Vietnam. It's dying in Vietnam. My oldest friend, Steve Angerman, was born in 1958, and he was a love baby to his parents, who are both in their 40s. They had most of their children in the very early 50s and the 40s. And his 12-year older brother, Donald, was exactly the perfect age for Vietnam. And although his draft number, they had a lottery back then, made it pretty clear that he was probably not going to have to get into the armed forces or go to Vietnam, in 1967, after much thinking about it, he'd already started college, he decided actually he was going to enlist voluntarily in the United States Marines, and if that meant going to fight in Vietnam, which it did, that he was willing to do so. His sense of valor and honor was such that he knew all his working class friends from the Detroit area hadn't been able to avoid going to Vietnam. And why should he, just because his parents had a little more money, and as Presbyterian ministers, his parents had maybe a little more clout and could have called politicians. We know from the following of history that 2 of our biggest embarrassments as presidents, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, both of whom were impeached, and both of whom used really phony, ridiculous medical excuses to get out of service in Vietnam. They're self-preserving. These are not brave men. These are not men you want to teach your boys to grow up to be. You want to teach your children, your daughters and your sons, to have valor, like Donald Angerman had. Now, he created some waves. His parents were absolute pacifists. And to hear that their son was volunteering to go into the Marines and go to Vietnam and likely get killed hurt them beyond all measure. But that's what he did. And they know for a fact the day Donald was killed that a sniper had targeted very likely the M16 he was holding, also mentioned by Gary Hales in his reflection today. That one bullet hits that bullet pack in the MC and it explodes. So the sniper could both think, I didn't actually shoot a man, all I did was actually shoot his gun, But they had been trained, confident that if you hit that cluster of bullets, it'll explode and kill the target. Don was killed. He was the first fired upon, the way I understand the story, exactly as Gary described. So the United States, that didn't really have a very clear policy in Vietnam in the first place, never even declared war on Vietnam. There's all this absolutely unusual, some say paranoid sense about creeping communism. When the United States lost the Vietnam War, which they did in 1975, Vietnam no more became a communist country there than it had been in 1956 when the French started leaving and the Americans first arrived. Vietnam's a 1,000-year-old country with a 1,000-year history. They have defended themselves against the Chinese for 1,000 years, and they're no more connected to the Soviet Union than they are to the United States these days. It's a fiercely independent and proud country. The Soviet Union and the United States had no business there. And some would say Donald Angerman had no reason to die. But God, the God we believe in, is a God of resurrection. He's more powerful than Bill Clinton or Donald Trump. He is a person who sees valor, who sees generosity, who sees courage, who sees fearless sacrifice and says, "Ah, good and faithful servant, job well done." And that's why the Angerman family, with whom I am friends, Don's parents have both passed away, but well into their 90s, and my oldest friend Steve, Don's younger brother who survived him, I think it's safe to say one of the biggest events of his life was the death of his older brother that he admired so much. And I just want to share this one little story. My friend Steve is a very active minister, especially the youth ministry of a Presbyterian church in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And Ann Arbor, Michigan is the most liberal city probably in the Midwest. No one there thinks wars are good ideas. And at their Presbyterian church, the overwhelming percentage of people would think that the Vietnam War was a waste and Donald's death was a waste. My friend Steve's youth class at the Presbyterian the Presbyterian church where he ministers, they were all talking, the high school age students, about do they have any regrets already in life? Or, if not regrets, is there anything that they would change? And they all had a few little comments, and my friend Steve, now at 60 years old, said, "Not a thing in my life." And the kids instantly said, "Wait a second, wouldn't you change the death of your brother in Vietnam? Wouldn't you keep him around?" And it gave Steve the chance to say, "Donald will always live. Little wussy pansies die 1,000 deaths as they're crouching in the White House with their endless girlfriends and wives and sleeping with the interns and their porn stars. But one Donald Angerman living a pure life of dedication and faith and fearlessness does more for the world. And that goodness and faith and fearlessness lives forever." Whereas a lot of men in their 70s and 80s who still have beating hearts are already dead. They're the ones we should regret. So today I lift up Donald Angerman. Today I lift up Gary Hales. I say thank you, men, for your service, your bravery, your wisdom, and your faith. Because of people like you, this is a beautiful world. And I pray in gratitude for you. That's what I got. God bless.